missed you.
Thank you.
So, let's begin. Approval of the action minutes. Or do we want to take the roll first? Isabel? Yeah, probably should. Since everybody's here, it would be nice.
Okay. Commissioner Beal,
Present.
Commissioner Deal,
Here.
Commissioner Bauer,
Present.
Commissioner Marks, and Chair Grossman.
Okay. Approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Fairly light minutes. We didn't have any major actions. Any corrections or missing items? Seeing none. All in favor?
We need a motion.
I motion we approve the minutes.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. So, the public comments, unless somebody wants to communicate from elsewhere. Any announcements from commission members?
I would like to make just a brief announcement that I've missed several months now due to health problems. I'm not 100%, but I'm back, and hopefully will not be missing any more meetings. So I'm glad to be here.
We'll take whatever percentage you have available.
I just wanted to remind everyone in the public that the Solano Stroll is this Sunday, and that I'll be volunteering with strollers and rollers, so there'll be bike valet parking if you want to come help the traffic congestion.
Anyone else?
Did you say bike ballet?
Valet bike parking.
No, ballet. You're
there'll be
too
some
young to
ballet
remember
too.
Monty Python. Do you remember?
Yeah, we actually will have ballet at the valet parking.
Unrelated.
All the markers being tutus? All right. Moving on. I did want to mention, although I will get back to this later, but tomorrow from 10 to 1 is a soft opening of the Albany Resource Center, which is located at what's the name?
It's the Albany United Methodist
United
Church,
Methodist Church.
at 980 Stanage Avenue.
So anyone who has any needs or concerns or needs help finding a resource, that's the place to come. And we will have more later. Okay. We don't have a presentation. Oh, staff announcements? Do you have anything, Isabel? Presentation we don't have. So moving on to the community. I'm looking at the minutes here. Moving on to the soda tax. We expected to have someone here this evening, right?
Yes, I had been talking to Ben Feldman, who was sort of heading a community kind of committee that had briefly talked about the soda tax, and he was expected to be here tonight, but he had told me yesterday that he was coming, but he isn't here now.
Well, let's delay this item and maybe he'll show up. Yeah. The Community Resource Center, there is an update in the packet. Allison has been at work contacting a variety of resources in the community, pulling together materials, meeting with various key figures, and so we're going to have a soft opening. By that we mean, is this Ben?
Yes.
Okay, well, let me finish this. By that we mean that we're not really completely up to snuff yet. We don't have the volunteers in place yet. There's still work to be done. but we want to get started and see who comes in and what starts to happen. And we have an open house coming up
Yes, September 29,
September 29th.
from
and
10
that-
to 1.
Yeah, and that'll be the official opening.
So how many employees are there right now and versus how many do you like to have?
We have Allison,
Okay.
and I'm volunteering, and Isabel will be present. And I don't know if the dates are set yet, but we will have somebody there on a regular basis for Berkeley Mental Health.
Right.
And Robbie will be there from Berkeley Food and Housing Project on a regular basis.
Great.
But we did put out an announcement for volunteers, and we haven't had any takers yet.
I think we have a few. Yeah, not official yet, but we've had a few people interested, so they may be coming tomorrow to meet with Allison. And hopefully by, in the next couple of weeks, we'll get a few more volunteers.
And if any of you would like to volunteer or know anybody who would be interested in volunteering, you can just show up or get in touch with Allison.
Great.
Isabel can put you in touch. So.
Yeah, I saw the email.
Okay.
I was going to say I'll send her an email.
Okay, very good. Okay, back to the soda tax. The commission has the request from the council as part of its work plan that we look at and make recommendations about how the soda tax money should be spent. Do you have that, the language of that? I'm trying to find that in our work plan, just so we do what we said we're going to do.
Basically, it's provide a recommendation to the council on health and wellness programs to be developed with soda tax revenue, where the matter will be discussed, either at a council meeting or at a community workshop.
So our task for today is to begin to address this issue. And I'm going to suggest a little bit later that we perhaps form a subcommittee to work on gathering data, but usually we talk first and the community talks afterward, but in this case, I'm going to ask Ben to talk about the work he's been doing and some of the ideas that have come up. Do you want to step up to that?
Who are you with?
My name is Ben Feldman. I'm a resident here of Albany. I worked on the soda tax campaign, and my previous employment was at the Ecology Center in Berkeley, where we were heavily involved in the Berkeley soda tax. So I work for the Farmers Market Coalition, which is a national organization. It's not directly relevant to this, but so my involvement here is more as a resident of the city of Albany with some background in soda tax and some of these related topics. And I know a few of the commission members, so thanks for the opportunity to speak before you tonight. So as Margie and Tara both know, there have been some community meetings related to the soda tax and some discussions around the most appropriate use of those funds. Without getting into too much detail, I think the overarching theme is that the most appropriate use of those funds would be directed towards efforts to combat, in particular, diet-related illness and specifically efforts to reduce soda consumption, and that the target populations of those should be most vulnerable populations. And the basis for those, in particular children, and the basis for those thoughts come largely out of the tax measure itself, and that the most appropriate use of those funds would be towards the overall goal of addressing health inequities in our community, in particular those that result from soda consumption. And there have been some specific ideas. One of the most, in those discussions, I would say the most formed idea, and the one that has the most interest and support relates to ensuring widespread and adequate access to healthy drinking water, safe, healthy drinking water. And I know that Tara's been working on that at the high school, and that there could be an opportunity for that at some other locations within either the school district, our public parks, and other public places. There's also been certainly interest in nutrition education, particularly around sugar-sweetened beverages, and whether, looking at the total funds, sort of a long-term regular class is probably not a realistic option, but there may be an opportunity from some assemblies, some of which, for example, are happening in Berkeley, which could be a good model to look at. Beyond that, what I would say what I would encourage the commission to think about is to consider a way to involve the community in the decision-making process to the extent possible, and I'd volunteer myself as someone who'd be willing to help with that. I've held off and sort of trying to have other community meetings with the expectation that as the city council and the commission have been more, as we get closer to something, that it probably would make sense for that to be the more official channels. There are a number of community groups who were either involved in the campaign or who have who've taken up this topic since, who have their perspectives and probably should be part of that process as well. So.
Do you have any thoughts about what costs would be involved in the things that have been discussed?
Costs in terms of?
For example, the drinking water access.
Yeah, so there's a particular hard cost associated with the equipment for a filling station. Tara probably remembers the figure. I don't, except that it's a little over 1,000, I think.
Yeah, it depends what structure you're talking about. With the work I've done at the high school, like a water bottle filling station with filtered water is around $1,000. But if you buy a certain number, you can get discounts and deals, and companies can work with you there. In terms of public water fountains, of which I know there are many in Albany that are not operational, I'm not sure about the numbers, but we can look at that, or the subcommittee can.
All right. Any other questions for Ben?
So do we have an idea of what the revenue is at this point?
From what I've heard, the revenue is pretty much on target with the expectation. So the amount.
I thought it was 20,000.
It is 2,200 and, I'm getting my number. Yeah, it was just over 2,200.
Okay. And what health inequities in Albany have you identified?
Well, so access to drinking water is an important one. And then, the other, in the campaign, the young people were really identified as a key component of in particular, because so much of the soda advertising is focused at children. So that was a key target population. And then there was also some discussion of engaging some of the, there's both African American and Hispanic American parent engagement groups within the schools, and looking, seeing if that might be an appropriate avenue to get some additional information.
Well, the African American population is 4%.
Right.
There's a much larger Asian population.
Mm-hmm.
Are they not soda drinkers? I mean, do we have knowledge of this, or?
As far as I know, I don't know of a Asian American parent engagement group. So that was part of the reason that
It's about
that was
30%
identified,
of the
but-
population.
Right.
Okay.
I would think Hispanics are a big part of Albany, and there seem to be a population that are vulnerable.
Less than 4%, though. Just FYI.
You can look at the census data on the Albany City website.
And then I think there's also, there could be approaches that could look at senior center. I think, with many seniors who are on government assistance, that could be a place to target in terms of outreach to some of our more vulnerable populations as well. And then also looking at the village, thinking about the fact that that is a student population, and I know that there is a higher rate of government assistance in the village than there is the rest of Albany. So there's a couple places that have come up in conversations in terms of trying to do outreach to some of the,
And that revenue amount that was 2,200?
sorry, 220,000.
Okay, that makes a little
Oh,
more
that's
sense.
much better. Yeah. And that's over what period of time?
That's over a year. The expectations were for a year, and from what I understand, the revenue to date matched those projections.
Do you happen to know, like, how much is in the account?
I
at this
don't.
point, or-
I don't. But of course,
2,200 is 2 water fountains.
yeah, right. And
Exactly.
Okay, and the
I
cost-
apologize.
The cost that we talked about, or maybe this is for Tara, but the $1,000, is that just for the station? Or, I mean, what about the ongoing cost of filters and so forth?
Yeah, from the high school, the maintenance deals with replacing the filter when that's necessary, but the filters do last a pretty long time, and the maintenance has been little to none since about a year and a half ago. But that is something to consider. There might need to be like checkups every so often on the stations.
Because I think this is a very good use, and just knowing the town, I walked through the town, I walked down the Ohlone Greenway, and I've noticed that the water fountain
too.
has been out of order. And it just seems like we should have these in strategic places where, and I've seen in Berkeley, I work in downtown Berkeley, and I've seen people coming in to restaurants and having to ask them, to fill their water bottles, and so this would be a good thing for the homeless people
Right.
as well.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit on multiple levels. Like an ultimate goal would be to have water bottle filling stations, but we even talked a little bit more fundamentally, like as you said, especially along the Greenway and other public areas, there are so many just basic water fountains that are out of use and non-operational, and so finding ways to get those back working is important, I think.
And you're saying some people don't have access to clean drinking water?
Well, ensuring that it's part of our public infrastructure, and that we do have many of these drinking
We have
fountains. And
homes that don't have access to.
that's a good question. As far as I know, pretty much all of the homes in Albany do have access to safe, clean drinking water. But they're
Required.
what's that?
Yeah.
It must, required, has to be required, probably.
Well, of course, there's a question of whether the water's been tested and what, for example, is the lead content. There have been problems in Oakland, for example, with lead in drinking water. I don't know that the water, I couldn't say the water here is necessarily safe.
Yeah, and I mean, Albany does have many older homes. That could be something to think about. Is whether there might be appropriate for.
Lead pipes in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard of leaded pipes in Albany.
I don't think anyone's ever looked into it. So.
Could be an interesting question.
Well, I
to
think the
address.
age of the pipes, I know a lot of the homes are 75 years old, and if the pipes haven't been replaced, then, you're getting metal deposits, and the tests we hear about are all at the source of the water, not as it comes out of the faucet. So.
Right, and even if the pipes aren't made out of lead, oftentimes the soldering is, and so there, that could be an interesting question to explore. And then also, there's also the question of, if the schools don't have fully functional drinking fountains, and you have kids who aren't coming to school with water, with water bottles, how are they getting their water, and making sure that we have alternatives to soda. If the idea is that we're saying to people, soda is problematic and contributes to diet-related illness, what is the alternative? And we want to make sure that our community has widespread good access to water for everybody.
Yeah, and the fountains that they have along the Ohlone pathway, a lot of people invite their dogs when they were still working. But I've noticed, I think it's in Berkeley, they have like little doggy basins. So that might be a good thing to include, because I know my kids would say, "Mom, don't drink out of that. The dogs drink out of that."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I would just say, I volunteer at the shower program once a week for people who don't have access to showers. And so when we do outreach, the people always ask for water. And unfortunately, we're handing out these bottles of water, and when they come to the showers, they want more than one. And it's like, I mean, it's good to give them the bottled water. I'd really like to find some solution, that we're just not handing out these bottles of water to them that, I don't know, they don't have their own permanent water bottles.
Maybe that would be an alternative. It
That
would
would
be
be.
to provide them with a
We'd have to figure out, if it would work or not. But yeah, that's an idea.
That's something we did at the high school, actually, not last year, but the year before, when myself and a group of students our goal was to end the sale of those single-use plastic bottles at school, but the administration told us that if we were going to do that, we needed some alternative. And so that's where the water bottle filling station came in, and then we had funds to provide reusable water bottles to students. We're looking at giving incoming freshman class reusable water bottles too. So I
We
think
should
that
look at
is
the
important.
resource center. Are we passing out bottles of water there?
We've talked about doing that, yeah.
And, I will also mention related to that, some of the funds from the Berkeley tax are going to all incoming freshmen at Berkeley High receive, each cohort that comes, each class that comes through, everybody gets a water bottle. So that's also another example of how some of these funds are being used. So I think, these are definitely the kinds of ideas that make sense. And
Well, Ken, are we ready to move to setting up a committee to do some further work on this?
I have one procedural question. What happened to the idea of having a panel that was made up of representatives from, like, the school board?
City council didn't like it. They wanted to go back to the council.
I'm sorry?
In Berkeley, they have a panel, but in Albany, the city council did not want a panel. They wanted to go back to the city council for the decision. In Berkeley, the panel makes the decision, or a panel of experts.
I guess my point is, I think I'd like to see representatives from the school board and from other community groups get more involved in this discussion. If we have a subcommittee handles it, then I guess that's my concern, is the subcommittee can't have meetings
No,
and so
but
forth.
the subcommittee can recommend that we have a community forum. If the subcommittee wants input, the subcommittee can obtain input in a variety of ways. I don't see the subcommittee as three people going off or two people going off and coming back with a plan. I really see them more as collecting ideas and figuring out how we can address this with the community, not to make the decision on our own. None of us are experts on this.
Right. And the city will host a workshop to hear from the community later in the fall. So whether it's at a council meeting or at a separate time, there will be opportunities for the community to be heard on this.
Good, all right, so.
And your recommendation would be part of that too.
Yeah, so then, so are we ready for a subcommittee? And if so, would somebody like to make a motion?
I would volunteer to be on the subcommittee.
Would you like to move that we have a subcommittee?
Yeah, I move that we have a soda tax subcommittee as part of the SEJC.
Okay, and
I second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we have a committee. Margie's offered to be on. We can only have two people, unfortunately, because of the Brown Act.
Yep.
I was wondering, Tara, if you might, since you've looked into this pretty heavily.
Yeah, I was wondering though, because I'm on the inclusivity subcommittee, if I'm able to be on two subcommittees.
Right. Because of the size of the commission, we try to prevent having members be on two
Right, that's
subcommittees,
what I
because
was
then
aware
it
of.
could create some
Overlap and-
overlap
that's what
discussions
I was-
and could create
Serial
a
meeting.
quorum. Yeah, so,
Well, I assume we still have a rent review subcommittee, correct? So,
It's
well, at this
not-
point,
no,
I
don't
think
so.
you've
That's-
delivered the report, so I think that subcommittee is done, and I would think maybe the inclusivity committee,
Well, we'll
part,
talk about
we
that
can talk
later.
about that later,
I
but,
was going to suggest a different way. of
okay,
doing it.
I'll volunteer to be on the soda tax subcommittee with Margie.
Okay, well then you can interview Tara.
Yeah, I'm always willing to provide.
No, I don't think we can.
No, you
Yeah,
can't.
no, not in the subcommittee, but within the
We'll figure out some way to
commission.
do it.
Within the commission, I'll still be a participant in talking
Tara
about this
can
discussion.
provide, give us a
Provide written
PowerPoint.
input.
She can create a PowerPoint for us.
There we go.
You can do all the work, Tara. You get the credit, that's why.
That's it, yeah.
Okay, I would just want
Thank you,
to,
Ben.
Yeah, and again, I'll just offer myself if it's helpful for the
Yeah, it
committee.
would be
I'd
helpful,
really,
yes.
I'm happy to be involved in a way that's appropriate. I'm not sure what your rules around your subcommittees are, whether they're open to outside participants. However, I'm happy to
Public
keep.
meetings.
Okay, great. Then I'll
Yeah, I'll be in
be in
touch.
touch.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Great.
Is
Can't
there
go, but you can.
is there a date for the first council forum, or however they've decided to?
No, there's no date.
There's no timeline
Thank
for
you very
us?
much.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you,
there's
Ben.
no date for the workshop.
Thanks, Ben.
There's no date set in place for the workshop, except that it's going to be late in the fall. So that's why you're starting to talk about it,
Right.
because
Yeah.
it could be,
Can it be coordinated so that it fits somewhere into an orderly process? Rather than two processes going on simultaneously?
I'm not sure what you
In other words, at the point when we have some preliminary ideas and notions about where to move, it would be helpful then, if the city has the forum before that, it makes our efforts kind of moot.
Right. Well, that's why you're starting to work on it
Yeah.
now, because the workshop is coming in late fall. So I would think maybe November.
So we'll be
So
ready
you
for it.
have basically, October and maybe November to get ready. So it shouldn't be, it's not going to be a long-term subcommittee.
Okay.
All right, very good. So we'll be eager to see what comes out of that. And it sounds like there are a number of interesting ideas to begin with. I already gave my update on the Resource Center, and the next item is community inclusivity. And I wanted to share a little thinking that I did about this, because I had a conversation with Isabel that inspired me to do a little bit of work and research, and I wanted to share some of what I learned. Last time I had suggested a few categories of inclusivity for us to begin to define what we're doing, like governance and communal and educational and employment and housing. And I realized that what I was doing was groping for some context to approach this assignment, some kind of a framework to figure out how do we approach what the council has asked us to do.
Right.
Specifically, the council has asked us, in line with their goal of engaging the diverse community, to connect with and engage the community, to conduct outreach and referral services to low-income residents, seniors, and people experiencing homelessness, and to continue to promote community inclusivity. So these are pretty general
Yeah.
statements. And they don't define inclusivity, they don't really give us much of a framework. And as Isabel and I were discussing it, the objective is vague. And when an organization like a city wants to tackle a broad, multifaceted program like inclusivity or diversity, it usually starts by a discussion of its purposes, by identifying its values, by identifying a rationale, and then deriving actions and evaluations so that there's some clear plan for where we're going and how we're going there. So I did a little Googling around to see what exists in form of inclusivity plans for cities, and there are some. This one is just a kind of a sample of the kind of shape of a diversity plan. It isn't actually a plan. But you can see here, if you look at this a little bit, that you begin, they recommend you begin by identifying a vision, by identifying a goal for some defined period of time.
Sorry, where is this from?
This one, I actually couldn't find the actual source of it.
Okay,
It's
just like a kind of
it's
template, or?
It's a template that
Okay.
came from some consultants, but I couldn't find but I thought it was something to kind of give us an idea of what might be in a plan. Objectives, strategies, actions, inputs, outcomes, indicators, all those kinds of things. You know, kind of a general sense of a plan. And I didn't make multiple copies of all of these because they're kind of big, some of them. But it makes sense to specify what the focus of your plan is going to be. This is from Clarksville, which is, I think, Alabama. They identify 4 foci for their recommendations: city employment, cultural awareness, procurement and training, partnerships, and visibility. They may not be our 4, but that's what this city kind of defined as the areas that they wanted to address in a plan. It makes sense to begin with input broadly from the community. The city of Eugene, Oregon, has a plan, and and a clear methodology in terms of how they approach this plan. They indicated, for example, that as the first step, the city solicited feedback from employees, community members, an outside diversity consultant to assess successes, barriers, and opportunities. Based on the information provided, the city adopted a vision that recognized diversity and equity as the cornerstones of excellence in effective public service. And that was sort of the basis of their planning. I'll pass this around so you guys can look at it. The city of Chico, they described their methodology. I'll just read you a little of this. In May of 2010, a series of perceived hate crimes occurred in Chico. Due to citizens' concerns, the mayor suggested it was time to review the city's and the community's efforts in making Chico more inclusive. At its meeting, June 1st, the council voted to direct the assistant city manager to work with the mayor to establish an ad hoc Brown-Act committee to develop a City of Chico diversity action plan. There were 23 people in the community who participated in this ad hoc group. They met many times. They went through a process which included open discussion, brainstorming sessions during public noticed meetings. They developed a working definition of diversity as well as a purpose statement. And then, using these constructs as a guide, they developed a framework for the plan and developed a foci for the plan, and that's all here for you to look at. This is the diversity statement that they came up with. Diversity is constantly changing. When we recognize, appreciate, and respect differences, we can work and communicate more effectively in governance and create a more unified, multifaceted community enriched through appreciation and understanding others' perspectives. The City of Chico Diversity Action Plan is a strategy to actively remove barriers and promote diversity within the city government and the larger community. The plan seeks to establish a climate for individuals and groups to develop the trust and understanding to engage in city governance processes, influence decision-making, and access municipal services. So here they're saying that they're not just interested in people feeling good. They really are interested in people having power in their community to affect decision-making. Right. One of the things that's nice about this plan is this statement is printed here in multiple languages.
Yes.
So I thought that was an interesting one. And this one is from Edmonton, Alberta.
Alberta, okay.
And I'll pass this one around. It's sort of the granddaddy of plans.
So are you suggesting that we do sort of a similar thing, like outline our goals?
What I'm suggesting is we engage with the council about the idea of developing an inclusivity action plan for
Right.
Albany.
That includes input from the public and other
Yes,
groups.
that we develop a plan for that that I think it will need a consultant
Yeah.
to lead it. And I think we will want to have a group, an ad hoc group in the city devoting attention to it, because I think it will take a lot of focused attention. We don't want it to take a million years to happen. We want to have it happen pretty quickly. We want to have it be a diverse group of people. We can play a role, I think, in framing it, but I don't know that we should become
I see.
the ad hoc planning group.
Well, what I'm thinking on this part is that maybe we create, you've got kind of some templates here, that we kind of create like an outline that addresses some of these things, and we can
Yeah.
have something a little bit more, do a little bit of the field work to create the structure. I mean, in particular, we know that for Albany, the cost of housing is
Yeah.
one of the biggest
That's right.
obstacles to
Yeah.
diversity, and that's what explains that
Yeah.
4% number we hear a lot. But just also, I think that's a good way to frame
Yeah.
the work, and then we can, talk about how to, maybe at the next meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can do a preparation. First of all, we're going to have to make a presentation to the council as to why they want to do this. And I'm not sure whether they're, how they're going to feel about that. Whether they see this as a good idea. We'll have to sell them on the notion if we agree that that's something that should happen. I think it's important to recognize that, and really to say to the city council that if you don't have a plan, you don't have action steps, you don't have outcomes, how are you going to know where you've arrived if you don't know where you're going in terms of inclusivity? What would that look like?
Where you
What would that
begin.
mean? Where do you begin? What are the concrete actions that really represent walking your talk? And really, I do think we need to be serious about accountability and a clear stated commitment to actions that open the city processes up to other groups. Because I think that there's been a tendency to think of inclusivity more in terms of events and community forums and gatherings, and that's all very good. I have no problem with that, but it needs to be pointed at something in terms of a meaningful outcome.
Yeah, and I think in terms of you talk about selling it to the city council. It's going to be a much easier sell if it's structured. If we come to it with something, that you looked at these different cities that have these plans, and that, this is basically what we think, the structure might look like. And I think, and get it on the calendar far enough in advance that, that people in the community know about it, and they'll show up, because they know this is a hot issue
Yeah.
in town about inclusivity, so we will get the support from the community to take whatever action is necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, that's what I'm suggesting, that we make such a recommendation to the city. We may need a little committee here to put that together, to do some of the kind of work that Brian's describing, or maybe, I don't know whether the inclusivity group wants to morph into that. But it's, to present it to the city well, I think there's some work that has to be done.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just open up that idea for discussion and thoughts about where we go. If this is something, first of all, that you think is a good idea.
Well, just to clarify, we would be asking the city for them to outline the specific goals to bring back to us, or are we, as a committee, thinking of informing those action points and then presenting that to them?
No, I'm thinking that we would ask them to fund the development of an inclusivity
Okay.
action plan, so that we would be
Right.
recommending a process to them, not an
Process.
outcome.
Right, not the specific
Yeah.
goals. Okay.
That needs to go, I think that needs to go on with a broader representation.
Sure, makes sense.
Yeah,
I think that one of the things that we would need to show is where we really, where improvements are called for in the community. And that might be a very sensitive issue, but I think that's really important, because I think it's one of the things the city council is going to look for. So if it's ain't broke, why fix it?
Yeah.
Type of attitude.
So that might entail doing a little bit of surveying of maybe some community leaders. One thing I was thinking we might do as a group is begin to develop a list of organizations that we should be in contact with.
Well,
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think that was something that we kind of played with initially, was to do some outreach and to actually go to these various different organizations rather than having them come to us, that we would go to them and get some feedback from them.
well, no, I'll just mention Albany Community Action was formed around this very topic. But another suggestion, I'm just going to say we should think about this, because it seems like you're starting to take a bit of a lead on this. Maybe we should consider reorganizing the subcommittees. It seems like maybe you should be on the subcommittee if you're taking this leadership role. So it's just a suggestion. I'm perfectly willing to continue.
Yeah, I'm willing to, but let's get clearer about what we're going to do. And
We're going to get the framework.
yeah, but I do see this as, a very central issue for us this year. We don't have a lot else on our agenda, really, and this is a big one. So I see us all working on it, maybe with a subgroup giving us some leadership.
I mean, what I would say about that is housing is really becoming a hot topic that's
Yes.
tied very closely to this. And I'm, frankly, I guess a bit just frustrated that we can't really do anything about it. That it's like trying to squeeze water out of a rock with this situation, because it's really at the state level. But I think that's the other thing we need to somehow figure out how to spend more time on.
There are several proposals at the state level, and the council might, for example, take a position on them. That would provide funding and speed along processes for building.
What about that 1A money? Now, some of that's supposed to be used by the city for
There was a-
affordable housing.
There was a conversation at the last city council meeting about that. Maybe it'd be worth,
I can say something about it because I was there.
Yeah, I was
Not this week, but it was a couple months ago. That basically there's different pools, and there's a pool of that Albany should get $2.8 million. But there's an issue about there has to be kind of like a shovel-ready project, that the priority is going to go to the cities that have something ready to build. And that's the challenge that Albany has. We don't really have anything that's shovel-ready, so to speak. And then there's other pools that come into play. So, but that's the kind of money we're looking at, right? Between $3 and possibly more $1 million. Based on whether we qualify.
and at the city council meeting, one of the proposals, Jeff Bonds made a presentation, one of the proposals would be to allocate that 2.1 million, because the city doesn't have anything ready right now, to the Berkeley Food and Housing Project. They're in the process of building, they have a piece of land from the city, and they have plans for building permanent supported housing, which includes services and, a wider, the full panoply of services, and also ongoing supported housing and a shelter.
Is that in Albany or
It would
Berkeley?
be in Berkeley, but it would be open to Albany. And the conversation was preliminary. I would imagine if the discussion went on, there would probably be an agreement about how many such, apartments, for example, would be available for Albany based on that contribution. The project itself is, I believe, something like 17 million. It's a multi-story building, and part of the cost, actually, what didn't come up in the meeting, but part of the cost is the land is a city parking lot, and they will have to replace that with underground parking, which is an expensive thing to do, and that's why the project is so expensive. The argument is, this is ready to go. It's all been approved, and it offers an array of services that wouldn't be available to anyone in Albany. The counter argument is, it's a Berkeley project,
Right.
and it
And
wouldn't
we're a
provide housing
subdivision
in
of
Albany.
Berkeley.
Yeah.
You know, just
I
repeat
know.
my comment on this that I made at city council was my concern, I guess, about this plan is people in Albany, or a lot of them, that voted for this tax, that voted for this bond measure, would have the expectation
Yeah.
it's going to be in Albany.
Yeah.
I think there's, and Bart pointed out, there's other people that, you know, understand that it's, you know, kind of one community in many senses, so.
At any rate, well,
That's what
I didn't
Berkeley
say
thinks.
In other words,
But
it
let's
doesn't
not,
matter
yeah,
where
let's
it
not
is.
get too far into
Yeah,
that. I just wanted to give
right.
you that information.
Okay.
This is going to come back to city council in a couple of months, I believe.
Okay,
But
so,
I just wanted to give you an update. But at any rate, back to the question of, do we want to propose an inclusivity plan?
so we would not really be doing the plan ourselves. Right, your idea is we're going to put something together to present to the city council to persuade them to provide some money for a consultant to
Yeah,
develop a plan.
And to support a
So
planning process.
So what goes into a plea like that? What basically, what do we need to show, Isabel, you're on now. What would we need to show to the city council
Is in
to?
that seat.
Well, it is, you know, an item that has been given to you as part of the strategic plan update. And I think showing other examples from other cities, showing that there's a need in Albany for a plan, I think those are all good arguments for that, for what you're proposing.
It would be helpful, for example, if we could collect from some of the groups that we're talking about, some information about issues that people have identified currently, in ways in which they, you know, they feel that their access is limited if there are such concerns. Then, you know, for your mention of housing, I mean, you know, clearly the opportunity for lower-income people to live in Albany is declining rapidly.
And I think also the work of Allison through the Community Resource Center will inform, could inform you on
The demographics.
demographics, but what are the needs and
And we'd have to come up with some kind of a figure, right?
We'd have to find out what possible costs have been involved. We could talk to some of these other cities and see what, you know, what they've spent. And
Could I just ask with Allison, with the resource center, is there currently some sort of method or system in place where she or whoever's working there is going to be keeping like records of the type of concerns people are asking about? And-
Yes.
Okay. So we can use that information as well.
And we do have that concern that came up out of the high school as, you know,
Yes.
that's kind of what really made it ring true for Albany. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a group that we can reach out to that was formed by students and teachers who are continuing to work on those issues as well, so we can get input from them.
you know, I lived in Albany since 1974, and I have really seen this community become what I consider more politically progressive. It used to be much more conservative and had some leanings that I thought were, you know, things that we maybe would not want to be proud of as a community. I was told some very racist things when I first moved to this community about the acceptance of certain groups that belonged or didn't belong here. And I have seen that shift. But unfortunately, I think some of that mindset still persists. And I'm really putting myself out here now on the limb, but, you know, one of the things that we want to do is reach the whole community, look at that mindset, or the diverse mindsets that we have, and how we remediate that, so to speak. So I guess maybe that's really, I mean, you can enforce certain rules, but if you don't get to the real gist of the matter, what are people thinking, then you're going to see this resurgence
Yeah, I think
that
we
we're seeing now.
we need to get to the root, the
Yeah.
cause of the problem, and I think that's cultural misunderstanding. You know, that people don't understand people that come from other countries as well, and this concept of cultural exchanges and sister cities and anything we can do to try to bring people together and understand, you know, their neighbors better, and you know, maybe they'll look at things in a different way.
Yeah, I was looking into some types of training that's available. The Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League both have trainings, but they're geared towards, I guess, junior high and high school. But they do have that available, and you know, we could look into that more to see what's available for people who are more mature and maybe perhaps more set in their ways. Maybe that, I don't know, maybe we could say that as one of the kernels of our effort is to really get to the mindset of people.
Right. I think that's important, but I do also want to just bring up political inclusivity as well. I know there are a lot of people that I've come across who may have political beliefs or opinions that are not considered the norm in Albany, and I know a lot of those people have felt kind of alienated as well. So I think in those discussions, it's important to definitely get people to listen to each other and respect opinions that differ from themselves as
So
well.
it's about tolerance.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it also is about power. I mean, if groups don't have equal power, then, you know, they're naturally not going to be able to control their lives. And what you're saying about history too, I think you're right that there is still. I don't know to what extent there is a presence. Of course, there are always racial attitudes in any community. But certainly the old reputation of Albany still exists if you talk to people in other communities.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, you know, when a community has a negative reputation, that affects who comes here, that affects how people participate.
And I just wanted to mention that I've heard comments from people outside Albany that after the incident in the high school, that it was just like, oh my God, you know, Albany is a racist community. That one incident from 3 kids has led to, it's changed people's view of Albany as a less as a racist city. That's just how people think. It's not true, but it's how people view things.
I think there was a time, and you're referring to that time when there was racism in the structure of the city and in the leadership, and I think that's not true now. But you know, but there was a time when, for example, the Albany police were viewed very negatively, and with good reason in some instances. At any rate. I would like us first to see whether, in fact, we want to move forward on developing a proposal for the city on an action plan. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we work on making a plan.
I'll second.
Okay. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who second?
I did.
Okay.
Okay, then let's talk a little bit about how we're going to do this. I think that we need a subcommittee to do a little leadership planning for us, to help us with this segment of the meeting. Maybe to begin by thinking about what would be the elements of a proposal to the city, and what do we need to create that proposal. If part of that, for example, involved getting input from various community groups, I could see us dividing those groups amongst all of
Right.
us, rather than just two people on a subcommittee, so that we could get some input. But I think we need someone to give us some leadership and direction.
So, guess I'm a bit confused.
Okay.
So, you don't want to keep this in the inclusivity subcommittee, or you want to talk about it in a different subcommittee?
I'm happy to keep it in the inclusivity subcommittee. I don't, this is not what you signed up for, so I don't want to.
Oh, no, I think, let me just comment on that. I think we thought about it, right? And there's been a little bit of all of us have been off for August, but you've provided leadership as the chairman is the direction we should go in. And I think the best plan would be for Tara and I to look at your idea and try to construct a framework and present it at the next meeting, and then we can all agree on it, and then present it to the city council at some time after that. Now, the only downside is then we have to wait till, another month to do that, but that's just kind of how it is with this
Yeah,
commission,
yeah.
because we only meet once a month.
There's that, and I think we have to figure out, we have to make a strong presentation. Better to make a strong presentation and it take a little bit longer than to make a weak presentation and have it be voted down.
Right.
That
Yeah.
would set us back years.
Now, on the other hand, let me just repeat that I think the support for something is there. It's
I-
there at
I
the community, but
agree.
it should be planned so that we can have the date in advance, so that the word will get out to the community groups. This is September. I also want to kind of caution against letting it slip into the holidays, because then we do need to address this. So that's my idea, is we need to come up with something at
Yeah.
the next meeting
Okay.
and present it to the city council. But, if you want to work it differently, that's what I was
No, that's
suggesting.
fine.
Maybe
That's, yeah.
it might be better, if you have more time on that, maybe it might be better to discuss restructuring the subcommittees.
Well, I'm willing, if that seems more feasible, but I'm quite happy for you guys to do it as well.
Okay.
I think it's
Either
going
way.
to take more than a couple.
Right, because I
meeting
was
or
going to
two.
say,
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't know if us two would really be able to come up with like distinct foci on our own, and I think it would take a lot of correspondence.
I would suggest that you take the lead for now and to get it going.
Yeah.
And, if you need support from the rest of the committee in the process, to ask it of us. I think it would be more effective and efficient that way. And I also think that what we're talking about is a cultural shift. And those are not easy to come by.
They take a while,
They
yes.
take a while,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think putting the time in, to do it really well is advisable.
Well, if people prefer, I'd be happy to take the lead. I would want to work with somebody in terms of, planning for the meetings. I'll be working with Isabel, but I don't know if someone else would like to be involved.
So I think it's either, because we got to be careful about the Brown Act.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's either, it's you join the subcommittee and one of us exits, but if it's Tara that exits, then we can revisit the idea of the soda tax, because she should be on either this subcommittee or the soda tax subcommittee. Because it's important to take advantage of having someone at the high school.
Yeah, which is why she
Both of
should be
these
on
issues
both.
Yeah.
But I would particularly, and I don't want to slight you, but I particularly am interested in Tara being involved in this because of the high school. Because I think there's fertile ground there, and there's an experience that needs to be captured.
Sure.
Would you be willing?
Yeah, definitely. Either way, if you guys think I would be more useful in terms of the inclusivity subcommittee, then I'm fine to stick with that.
So I would say we reorganize, and you and Tara will be the inclusivity subcommittee, and then I'm available for one of the other subcommittees.
Okay.
If anyone is overworked or. if
Could I make
there's a
one-
Subcommittee that comes up, we ought to be able to have 3 subcommittees.
Yeah.
Is that really a hard, fast rule, or is it just a guideline about one person can't be on 2 subcommittees?
Well, I think it's not a hard rule, but it is it's caution. You know, we're trying to make sure that, because if you're on 2 subcommittees, then you're having discussions with 2 other members, and it could be it could be considered a serial meeting.
If it's about the same topic.
Overlap.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you're talking about, because you could discuss different things, right? Because all of these subjects kind of relate to each other a little bit. So I would say I would just be cautious to having one member in more than
Well, I'm not sure with the soda tax, I'm not sure how that ties in to anything else. I think, inclusivity and housing tie together, but I don't see how soda tax has much to do
Well,
with.
there's already 2 members on
Yeah.
the subcommittee, so the tax, you can't
There are
have 3
now,
members.
but what I was saying was that the reason earlier was because she is on the inclusivity, and I would just wanted to clarify that.
I mean, I can ask, somebody else in the city.
City
to see
council
if-
or manager,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and see, but that would be
Okay.
my that's.
More for future reference.
Okay, so what I suggest then, if we've agreed that we want to do this, make this recommendation, I will work with Tara and with Isabel, set up a meeting sometime in the next couple of weeks to begin to think about how to make this proposal. We'll bring our work here. We may ask you all to be involved in a variety of ways in terms of gaining information. For example, if there are community groups that we want to have contacted and content that we want to include in this proposal. And the goal would be to develop this proposal as quickly as possible, but have it be done well and thoroughly and vetted. I think the idea of outreaching to some of these groups in terms of support for this proposal is also important in terms of the process with the council. It would be helpful when we go to the council if other people are present and.
Excuse me, Bart, can I just add, I think looking at this, to have it by the end of the year may be a little too quickly. I mean, look at how long the Resource Center took, but it was worth it in the end
Yeah.
for the product. So I think this is going to be controversial.
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of people who think there's no problem in Albany. Everything's just hunky-dory. And so I don't want to have us, say, okay, the end of the year is our.
Yeah, I'm not setting a
Okay.
target for a date. I think it takes as long as it takes. We just want to be efficient and do it well.
And I think the way I read Bart's statement earlier is this is a long-term process. This is going to go on for years and decades. What we're looking for now is just an outline and a framework to present to the city council to ask for this long-term thing. It's not to create a long-term plan. It's to create the framework. We need a framework to work within. And it's a long-term process. And, I think this is like an initial draft that we could take to
Yeah.
city council and, obviously it'll get approved over the month.
Okay, well, I think we've got enough for now. And I think that's all we do have 2 other items on our agenda. We have the 2 reports, Albany Project Hope and the Echo Housing Report. These are quarterly reports, And since there's no representatives from the organizations,
It's for your information.
Okay.
there are some questions that I have. I don't know if you'd be able to answer them.
If not, I can get back to you on the
Okay.
answers.
Well, I'm looking at the Project Hope proposal, and she indicates that she spends several hours a week visiting facilities, that is, housing where she's got people living at this point. Do you know how many such places there are?
How many people are in housing?
How many housing
Places,
places,
centers.
how many houses are people in?
Right. I know we have one house that has 4 people, and then there's probably, at this point, there's probably 2 or 3 more.
Okay, all right, so it's a small number. And then I was noticing that for the fourth quarter, again, the outcomes in terms of clients housed and clients maintaining housing, they're low, and even for the year-to-date, they're kind of low. But particularly this current period, and I'm just wondering if you have any idea why that might
Are
be.
you looking on the Echo?
No,
I'm looking at
Project Hope.
Project Hope performance measures, quarter 4.
Maybe I'm missing a page.
I think what happened was new clients housed, they almost reached their target. They're too short.
Yeah,
Clients maintaining housing for 6 months. What may have happened there, the target was set pretty high because at the time we had a lot of people in housing a year ago, and a lot of these people were exited in a good way. So that's why I think the number is a little lower.
Okay.
Because if you count the number of people housed, there's 8, and of those 8, 6 have been in housing for 6 months.
okay.
So it can't be higher than, so the target, I think, was a little off to start with.
And the last thing I wanted to mention, this is more of an input to you, actually. I'm looking at the attachment E, the tracking form that they have, where they have all the things that Robbie does. And there's one in the top third of the chart called All Other Discussions.
Yes, and they're
And
not
there are way
documenting.
more all other discussions than anything else.
Yeah, and they're not documenting the
Yeah,
topic.
so obviously that needs to be broken out
Yes.
because it doesn't mean anything. So those are my questions. Anybody else have comments about the?
I do. I wanted to bring to people's attention if they didn't read it, but one of the things in the report was that someone had applied to Sprouts and had gotten the job. And I have to tell you, I went into Sprouts for the first time the other day, and I was really impressed with the personnel that worked there. I mean, they're not like these young yuppies or what. I mean, they're people that look like our community, and there was seniors working there, and a lot of the diversity in the ethnic mix was much greater than in other stores that I've seen. And I was just impressed by what I saw. So I'm happy to read this, that someone applied and got the job. That they hired a homeless person. I think that's fantastic.
Okay, on the top of the second page, they're talking about the case manager assessing the benevolent program. Do you know what the benevolent program is?
It sounds like it's a program where people can get laptops to further his educational goal, ultimately getting better job opportunities. So it must be a program that provides tools.
Oh, okay.
Anything else on the VFHP report? Okay, so if you could give them that feedback, Isabel?
Yes, I will. Mhm.
And then what about the Echo Port? Any comments, questions?
Well, there's nothing under Albany
Yeah.
for fair housing services by protected classes. And I also was kind of curious about how these two kind of fit together, the fair housing and the Project Hope. Are they interrelated, or they're totally,
There are two different agencies that
agencies.
provide very different
okay?
services.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. It's of some concern, because we do make a financial contribution,
Right.
and apparently nobody's using the services.
Yeah.
Fair housing, there hasn't been much activity. There's more activity for counseling, tenant-landlord counseling, the second program that Echo Housing is funded for.
Yeah.
So if you go to the last page of the packet, there's data just for the city of Albany. It's that chart
Yeah.
right here. So you'll see that total this year, 25 people use the services. And the way Echo Housing is funded is through CDBG funds that basically the county, Echo has a contract with the county, and the county administers this contract, but there's some urban county CDBG funds that are used to fund Echo.
What's CDBG?
Community Development Block Grant.
Okay.
Where are you seeing the 25, Isabella?
The bottom,
Down at the
the
bottom,
corner,
this one.
Oh, that one, okay.
total, yeah.
Oh, here it is, yeah, okay. Oh, no, I don't seem to have that one. Okay. I don't have it in this particular.
Here, you can look at it.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Okay, all right, well, so at any rate, in terms of the fair housing stuff, maybe there are no problems, but that seems unlikely. But maybe, there may be a problem in people knowing that
Right.
Echo is available to serve them. And I wonder if we could get them to do a little bit more publicity.
Are they connected at all with the resource center?
Aren't they planning to participate?
Right,
Um,
no?
I don't think we've contacted them yet, or if we did, nothing has been said.
We have information about them.
Yes, we have flyers. They're very good about distributing flyers.
That's
They
a good
come to the
idea.
resource fair, the senior resource fair that we do in April.
Right.
It would be a good idea to ask them to come to
Yeah.
the resource center, maybe once a month, something like that. I've been thinking, and, one idea might be that we have one of our afternoons a month that might be devoted to housing issues. Where we might bring in some resources specifically on that.
And is there,
Because of how pressing that is for people.
right, is there contact information on the city website? Okay.
So let's talk about that with Allison.
Yeah.
And also let Echo know that we would like to see a little bit more visibility. Anything else? Seeing nothing else, we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
What about our agenda for next?
Oh, that's right.
Future
Let's
items,
take
yeah.
a moment. I'm sorry. Let's take a moment. We certainly will have something further on inclusivity.
Sure.
But do you think you'll be ready to give us a report on the soda tax?
Yes.
So those are two things.
I'd like to put rent review, status report. Hopefully there will be something by then.
Yeah, if there is something by then, we'll put it on the
Yeah.
agenda. It's,
I think that even if there's not a specific step up as far as responding to the RFP, you know, we may at some point need to rethink our strategy, and that might be the time to do it.
The only thing I'm going to say to that is that it is on the council has given direction to staff. So at this
Right.
point,
Yeah.
it will come back to the commission when, consultant has been hired or when we've gotten some applications for you to review possibly,
Or a new direction for
or a
the
new direction, yes.
I'd like an update on how the opening of the resource center goes as well.
Certainly. I'm just noticing on our work plan, Council Strategic Goal 5, Objective 5.3, identify funding mechanisms to ensure stable and effective budget. And I'm not sure why that's on here.
Oh, it's, if you go just under that, your task was to provide feedback on future draft policy to include evaluation of options for low-income exemptions as part of future tax
So
measures.
it's that issue, the exemption issue.
Right, for future tax measures, but at this point,
We don't have any
no.
standing, okay. Is there anything else on our work plan?
I wanted to ask the last bullet, investigate service gaps for seniors to age in place, if that's under housing or how we've planned to address that, if we have it all, or if there's any update on senior
Why don't we-
situations.
Why don't we put that on the agenda for discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to.
I wonder, Isabel, is there anyone, including you, from the senior center that
was gonna
might
ask,
be able to
yeah.
speak to that in terms of what the needs are? I could speak to it as an old person, but that would,
We all could, well, at least some of us.
Yes, possibly, maybe not at the October meeting, but
Just in the
at a
future.
future meeting.
Yeah.
I've looked into this. The city of West Hollywood has a really great, stay-in-place program. So maybe we could look at that. I'd be willing to bring it to the next meeting just to talk about it because I've looked into it and that's probably the most extensive one that I've seen was West Hollywood.
the other group that we might bring in, maybe not for the next meeting, but at some future point, would be Ashby Village. Because they do have members from Albany, and they do outreach to Albany. And that's specifically what they're about, is helping people to stay in their homes.
Right.
Anything else? Okay, well, that sounds like plenty. So, a motion to adjourn?
I think Brian.
Oh, yes, I'll repeat my motion to adjourn. Anyone want a second?
A second.
Anyone want to stay?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Good. Cool. Even ended a little bit early for